I want you to remember that God's created everything you see. He breathed it into existence. You remember when his people were caught up in slavery? He rescued them. What he did was he parted the sea and he made a way for them, and then he delivered their enemies to them, and he unlocks wombs, and he provides water from a rock, and he provides manna from heaven, and he brought down the walls of Jericho. He froze the sun, allowing victory. He's toppled giants with tiny stones. He's brought fire from heaven. He's shut the mouths of lions. He preserved life in the belly of a well. He's fed thousands with a few loaves. He gives the weak strength. He heals the sick. He's made the blind see, the deaf hear, the mute speak, the lame walk, and he's overcome evil, and he's made a way through death for you and me by the death and the resurrection of his son, Jesus Christ, that we will live with him forever. We will dwell in the house of the Lord forever and ever and ever and ever. What are we afraid of? His resume is flawless. He controls everything. And he loves you.
So the God of your story, the book of Daniel. We're going to talk about several familiar passages as we go through here. Most of us know all the stories from Daniel. We learn them in VBS. We learn them in Sunday school. Daniel in the lion's den, the 3 Hebrew boys in the fire. These are stories that are very familiar, but we typically hear them as kids' stories. I'm here to tell you, God doesn't write kids' stories. There are no kids' stories in the Bible. Now, thank God we're able to simplify them and teach them to our children so we can begin pouring the Word of God into kids. But these aren't kids' stories. There's so much more that we miss when we just leave them as another kid's story. And so we're going to examine these stories, and hopefully we're going to pull out some real practical application for our lives from the life of Daniel and his friends. Now, when we read the book of Daniel, really when we read anything from the Bible, it's important that we understand context around what we're reading. Those who are in my 8th grade Bible class have heard me say over and over and over, context is king. Without context, you're lost. So we have to know the context. Find out what was going on in this day, what was happening, and see if that relates to what we're experiencing today. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to look at this passage in its context there. Then we're going to look at it in our context today and try to build a bridge of application. So that's what we're going to try to do tonight. The book of Daniel is basically a manual for how to survive and thrive in a dark and hostile environment. It doesn't take long if you have a television or a smartphone to look around you and see that the environment we currently live in is a dark and hostile environment, especially to the things of God. And for us as followers of Christ, if that's what you are, in the midst of all of this, the world wants you to retreat into this dark place. It's okay if you have faith. It's okay if you love Jesus and sing the songs and have a Bible. Just keep it to yourself. Do that on your time. You can do it on Sundays and Wednesdays, that's fine, but don't bring it into the real world. And so there's lots that we see in this book that we experience today. There's a few things we need to kind of get out of the way so that we understand the application. Babylon is mentioned here. The kingdom we read about in Daniel is not just simply a physical kingdom from Daniel's day. If we read from Genesis to Revelation, that word shows up over and over and over. It is representative of a spiritual power that we still face today. Babylon is seen everywhere in the Bible. It's a spiritual oppression to the things of God. It's not hard for us to see that there are a lot of people out there trying to undermine our belief in one God. Our belief that even if there is one God, that there's only one way to that God, and his name is Jesus. That there is a set of absolute truths that are written in this Bible that were true then, are true today, and will be true tomorrow. Moral absolutes that apply to my life and your life, the same as they apply to Daniel's life. The devil doesn't want you to know that. He wants you to do whatever feels good today. Whatever you think is right, whatever's right for you. That's what he wants you to do. The problem with that is it doesn't work. And we see that lived out in the book of Daniel. So Babylon represents a spiritual power that is built in opposition of God and the things of God, independent of God, where man sits at the center seat of everything. The battle that's been going on since the beginning of time. And we have this example laid out for us of what faithfulness to God looks like in a secular world controlled by powers that are at war with the gospel. The same type of world that we live in today, where we find ourselves in the middle of a war for our identity, just like Daniel and his friends. What we see first in this war for our identity is that our enemy wants to rename us. Now, most people in here, I would assume that you know your name, right? Anybody in here not know their name? Okay, so we all know our name, right? But probably not many of us know what it means. Or if we do, we Googled it one time because we were bored. And so we Googled, what does my name mean? And it was something, and we were like, oh, that's funny, and we just kind of moved on. I Googled my name for the purpose of this, and it says that I'm a lover of horses. I like horses. Right? They're okay. I don't own any. I don't ride them. I've ridden like 2 ever. They're all right. I wouldn't hurt a horse, I guess. But I'm not a lover of horses. That doesn't identify me. That doesn't change my life because my name's Philip, and that means lover of horses. But tonight we're going to read about 4 young men who knew exactly what their names meant. 4 young men, Hebrew men, Jewish men, that in their culture, their name was a really big deal. Like a really big deal. Their name was a blessing. Their name was words spoken over their life from birth. And it carried great significance in who they were and who their parents wanted them to become. And just like today, these 4 young men, they had an enemy who stood in stark opposition to their God, who wanted them to live independently of God, to take that seat of control back in their own life. He tried it once. It didn't go well for him. And he realized that since he couldn't usurp God, he couldn't get to God, that instead of that, he would get to his image instead. I believe that the enemy said, if I can't hurt God, I'll harm the closest thing to his heart, and that is his image. You and me. Because God made man and woman, male and female, in his image. It tells us so in Genesis. And he did that for a specific purpose and a specific design. You were made for a purpose. You were made on purpose and with purpose. And so we see in Daniel chapter 1 where the enemy tries to take that from Daniel by renaming him. In the very beginning, it says, during the 3rd year of King Jehoiakim's reign in Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, this guy's literally the most powerful ruler in the known world at this time. He came to Jerusalem, he laid siege to it. The Lord gave him victory over King Jehoiakim and permitted him to take some of the sacred objects from the temple of God. So he comes in and he pillages everything. He actually goes inside the temple of God and takes these sacred objects, and it's not bad enough he steals them, he then goes and puts them in the temples to his false gods, just as a slap in the face to the Hebrew God. But he didn't stop there. He took some of the Israelites, some of the royal family and the nobility and the upper echelon, some of their children, and he removed them from their home and took them some 900 miles back into the heart of Babylon, about a 2 or 3 month journey. Many of these young men had just seen their families killed, their homeland ravaged. They were uprooted from everything they knew to be normal. They were taken to a new place 900 miles away. It might as well have been for them. And these weren't grown men. These were teenagers. These were high schoolers. The Bible tells us that these were young men without any physical defects. Good-looking young men, quick learners, suitable for instruction and wisdom and knowledgeable, perceptive, capable of serving the king. The best of the best. And why did he do that? He brought them back so he could teach them the Chaldean language, the customs, the literature, to indoctrinate them into a new way of life, to reshape their identity and who they thought they were, to remove them from everything they knew to be normal in their life and their culture and the world, and to take them into his. Because he saw something in them that he could use to perpetuate his own kingdom and his own empire. If he could just indoctrinate them into the Babylonian way of life. Now, that's not the way that the enemy does it today. He's not going to kidnap you and take you 900 miles away because he doesn't have to. He can indoctrinate you with that. He can indoctrinate you with your television, your education system, the news outlets, all sorts of other things. He doesn't need to take us 900 miles away because he can reach us in our home. He shapes and forms all kinds of different things that stand in direct opposition to God. Meanwhile, the world will tell you that you're supposed to keep your faith to yourself. You're told to hide it, to use it on Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights, and then the rest of the week, just you do you. Do what feels good. Do what you want. Whatever you think is right, just do that. It's fine. It's really fine. Just live your life according to your truth. It's everywhere. The message of Babylon has not died out. It's grown stronger. And you have to decide, either you're going to sit in the center seat of control of your life, or you're going to yield that seat to Jesus. That's the only two options we have. Verse 5 says, the king assigned them daily provisions from the royal food and from the wine that he drank. This was actually a pretty good place to be. Like, if you're going to be a prisoner, this is where you want to be a prisoner. They had the best food, the best drink, the best education. It says they were trained for 3 years and then they would enter the royal service. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were 4 of the young men chosen, all from the tribe of Judah. And if we keep reading, we realize the first thing that happened, the first thing this chief official does is he starts giving them Babylonian names. He strips them of their identity, of the blessing their parents gave them, and he gives them new names. Daniel was called Belteshazzar. That actually sounds kind of cool, right? Sounds kind of manly and tough. Hananiah was called Shadrach, Mishael, Meshach, and Azariah, Abednego. When we think big deal, it's just a name. You can change my name. It doesn't do anything to me. But it is a really big deal when we understand what their names meant in Hebrew and what their new names meant in Chaldean. Daniel's name in Hebrew means God is my judge. So every day he would know that he stood before an audience of one to judge him, and that audience was God. Belteshazzar, gotta mean something cool, right? Actually, Belteshazzar was not even a male's name in Babylonian culture. And it wasn't like one of those like Taylor or something that can kind of go both ways. No, this was a straight up girl's name. A female name which meant lady, protect the king. So they took his name from male to female. We never see that happen today, right? So Belteshazzar, it's a female name from God is my judge to a focus on man. About Hananiah, it means God has been gracious to me. A place of grace, appreciation, thankfulness, and praise. To Shadrach, which means I'm fearful of God. From a place of confidence in God to being terrified by it. They're restructuring their identity. You can't trust God. He's holding out on you. God loved you so much you wouldn't be here. You would have been where you were. He left you. He's done. He gave up on you. When are you going to give up on him? He let you down. Mishael, which meant who can compare to my God? And this wasn't like a legitimate question. This was like a bow your chest out, like who can compare to my God? Statement, not question. To Meshach, meaning I'm despised and humiliated. From confidence and courage to humiliation and fear. Azariah, God has helped me. To Abednego, which literally means servant of Nebo, is a god of vegetation that they have. They're saying, look, dude, your God hasn't helped you. He's out of here. Why don't you find a new one? If he loved you, he would have left. And this is a big deal because they knew what these names meant. As they're learning a new language and a new culture, everything around them would have sounded like gibberish in this new language, except for those words. The first words they learned, their names. And they would have heard it over and over and over. If I gave you a name when you walked in here that wasn't very nice, if I called you ugly or stupid or something like that, at first you'd just be like, that guy's a jerk. But if every time I saw you, I constantly pounded on it over and over and over, eventually pieces of that start to stick to who you are. You start to buy into the lie. You start to believe that's who you are. It's indoctrination. It's changing their name to change their identity. And as I'm reading this, I really can't help but try to wonder, if I was in their position, there's one question that I can't help but wonder if I would ask. And I want to ask you that question tonight. Is it really worth all the trouble to become the person that God made you to be? That's the question. Is it really worth all of the trouble to become the person that God made you to be? Our society, our culture would say no. It's not. But Jesus says in John 16:33, he said, in this life you're going to have trouble, you're going to have pain, you're going to have sickness, you're going to have issues. Things aren't always going to go your way. He says you're going to have trouble, but take heart because I've overcome the world. And for him to overcome the world, he has to overcome the God of this world. And who is that? 2 Corinthians 4 tells us Satan, the God of this world, has blinded the minds of them that don't believe. They're unable to see the light of the gospel. They don't understand this message about the glory of Christ, who is the exact likeness of God. See, there's a war going on all around us that we don't talk about. We don't talk about because we can't see it. Right? We don't look at it. And it's easier just to blow it off and pretend it doesn't exist than it is to acknowledge it. But here's the truth. This is coming from a Marine. You cannot fight an enemy that you refuse to acknowledge. You just end up defeated. That's why we find ourselves not being able to stop looking at things on our phone and our computer that we shouldn't be. That's why we can't keep our hands to ourselves when we're with our girlfriends or our boyfriends in situations we shouldn't be in. That's why we can't stay away from certain substances in our life. That's why we have a constant need for validation. That's why we keep compartmentalizing all these aspects of our life into this is church me, and this is school me, and this is home me, and these are different versions of myself that make me feel loved and accepted wherever I'm at, even if it means I lose myself in the process. Because if we ignore the battle that goes all around us every day, we perpetually lose to an enemy that we refuse to acknowledge. So is it worth the trouble to become the person that God made you to be? Yes, it is. Is it worth the trouble to become who God made you to be in a culture and a society that is screaming for somebody to help? Somebody to find identity, somebody to find gender, somebody to find morality. Somebody just tell me what the truth is. Yes, it's worth it. We live in a world that says do whatever feels good. Make your own truth, right? We all have our own truth. You have your truth, I have my truth. But nothing else in our society or our culture works that way. Nothing. We live in a culture that says we can have moral relativism instead of moral absolutes, but you can't drive without absolutes. Try it. You can't go to a restaurant and eat without absolutes. You can't grocery shop without absolutes. You don't get to sit down at a meal when it's over and decide, I think it was actually only worth $6 and walk away. Culture and society doesn't work that way. Everything we live by absolutes. Yet there's a message that's communicated to us subliminally, but in our face every single day in our classrooms, in our jobs, on our phones, wherever we go, this resonating saying, you can do whatever you think is right and nobody can tell you different. But I can't drive that way. I can't shop that way. I can't steal that way. I can't do those kinds of things because there's a code, there's an order, there's a structure that we must live by. Freedom is found in the presence of rules, not the absence of them. So is it worth the trouble to become the person God made you to be? Yes. What you believe about yourself influences every decision that you will ever make. What you believe about yourself influences every action that you will ever take. And whether you choose to acknowledge it or not, right now, in this very moment, there is a war going on for your identity. The enemy begins by renaming you. And then he wants to reshape you. What does that mean? Once he gets you to believe differently about yourself, he can get you to do things that you never would have done. Read Daniel 1:8. Daniel determined that he would not defile himself with the king's food, with the wine that he drank. Why is that such a big deal? I mean, you're captured. You're a prisoner. Your family is most likely dead. You're in this faraway land. You're probably never going back. Why can't you at least just enjoy a few perks? Eat the food, drink the wine. Who's it gonna? See, there's specific dietary rules for ancient Jews, and really for Jews today as well. They couldn't control really anything about what was going on around them, but they could control what was going on inside them. And these 4 young men eating the right things was an act of worship. The only act of worship they were able to perform physically in that time. And these were young men. Like I said, teenagers, high schoolers. They had conviction and they had the courage to follow through on the conviction. So he asked permission from the chief official not to eat this food or drink this drink. He says, listen, that goes against my God. God's a little worried. He says, listen, if I let you do that and the king finds out, I'm dead. And as much as I like you, I like me more than you. And so I don't want to do that. So he finally says, all right, I'm going to give me 10 days. Give me 10 days. Let me eat these things. Just raw vegetables and water. And I'll tell you what, 10 days, check me out. Check me and my buddies out. If we don't look at least as strong as these other guys, okay, we'll do it. So they're betting on God. They said, we're going to worship our God. We're going to do what he says, and we're going to let the chips fall where they may. 10 days, they don't look like the other guys. The Bible says they're 10 times above the other guys. They stood out far and above everybody else in the area. See, despite the enemy's attempts to redefine who Daniel was, him and his friends, they kept God at the core of who they were. But with that idea in mind, we have to ask ourselves that question. When I'm dealing with my core, like the very center of who I am, what are those values that I hold dear? What are those things that no matter what's happening around me, that's there. That's not going anywhere. Is Jesus going to be the center, the core of your being? Because it's a whole lot easier to resist all those pressures when your roots are deep in God's truth. So are you going to build your life on the Bible or on Babylon? The Babylon of our culture today? Sex, money, power, moral relativism, constantly chasing acceptance against ever-changing standards, redefining our identity over and over and over, trying to please people who cannot be pleased around us. Or will you choose the God who created you, the God who's the same yesterday, today, and forever, who says, listen, you are accepted and loved exactly how you are, no matter what. The things that he asks of you, they're not so that you can earn his love, they're for you. They're not for him. They're for you. In this war for your identity, the enemy wants to rename you and reshape you, but God's desire is to reward you. Yeah, God doesn't really reward me. Have you looked at my life? I don't see any rewards. Friends, you're not looking. God rewards us in all kinds of ways. The problem is we just come to expect it to look a certain way. And when it doesn't look that certain way, often we don't recognize it. But if you really, really, really feel like, man, I don't see God doing much in my life, maybe it's time to look into it. Maybe it's time to say, what am I doing for God to reward in my life? When's the last time you spent any time? Not here at church when you sit in a room with everybody else. When's the last time you spent time with God? Just you. When's the last time you even acknowledged him except for when you needed something? So if somebody's sick, I better start praying. I need this new job, I better start praying. When's the last time you really acknowledged him as your creator, as your savior, as the control seat of your life? Yeah, it doesn't mean life's going to go easy. Doesn't mean storms aren't going to come. You're still going to have difficulties and hard times and troubles. But Jesus said he overcame all that. He's bigger than all that. So this is what we see here. God gave these 4 young men favor. He rewarded them. The king interviewed them. He interrogated them. He tested them. And not one of the other men around them was equal to these 4. So they began to serve in the king's court. The Bible says that these guys were the guys the king would go to with everything. So they were 10 times better than any other advisor he had. He would go to these 4 men for everything. Because they had enough conviction and courage to stand on that conviction. But just like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, if you want to establish God's reputation, you may have to risk your own. This is as true today as it was 3,000 years ago. Everything great is earned and often learned. There's a story that on September 9th, 1965, there was a Navy pilot named James Hockman. He was shot down in North Vietnam, taken captive. He was a prisoner of war. He was held for 7 years, and because of his rank, he was constantly tortured and beaten and kept in a cell with no windows. How do you survive that? 7 years. How do you make it out of it? They asked him that question. How did you make it out when so many others around you did? So many others just gave up. What was it that kept you going? His answer was, I never lost faith in the end of the story. I never lost faith in the end of the story. Can you say that? Tonight, right where you are in life. Can you say, I've never lost faith in the end of the story? Whatever you're dealing with, whether you're going through something or just the day-to-day in life, have you lost faith in the end of your story? Have you lost faith in the God of your story? These young men, these teenagers were in a spot where it would have been real easy to lose faith in the God of their story. I'm going to show you in the next couple of weeks, it actually got much worse for them. They had every excuse in the world. They didn't take it. And the God of their story showed up and showed off over and over and over in huge ways. We all want God to give us that miracle moment, right? We read it in the Bible. Part the Red Sea, close the mouths of lions, do these huge things. But are we willing to do what it takes for him to do that? Are we willing to stand in the positions that these men stood in faithfully to see the miracle happen? Because what he did for them, he'll do it for you too. And life can be a series of difficult things. We got some mountains, and there's a lot of valleys too. What do we learn in the process? A lot of things. People will try to rename you, tell you who you ought to be, how you ought to act. But if you honor the Lord and what he says, he will reward you. Because he doesn't want you to lose faith in the end of your story either.